Okay, we are ready to go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is August 5th, 2020. We're having the Urban Renewal Agency meeting starting now. Calling roll. Mayor, are you here?
Uh,
Keith Locke, are you here?
I'm here, yes.
Ginny Carlson, are you here?
Yeah,
Doug Morton, are you here? Doug appears to be absent. Stephen Topaz is here. That takes care of the roll call. We have consent of agenda for approval. We have also under this the Urban Renewal Public Meeting Minutes dated May 15th, 2019, an Urban Renewal meeting. Is that also a public meeting or just meeting dated May 15th, 2019? Do I hear a motion for approval?
I will make a motion to approve consent agenda A and B as presented.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. I am now open to public comments. Are there anybody on the floor that would like to make a comment, Matt?
I do not show anybody wanting to make a public comment.
Okay, moment given to any comments. We now have some discussion items. We have a presentation, Urban Renewal Financial Update presentation. Is that person available?
They are on the call. So Nick Papanek has been made co-host and would like to introduce him. He's the Tiberius Solutions, our financial advisor on the update of the urban renewal plan. And
Well, sir, it's your turn to speak.
Thank you, Counselor. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation that I believe you all have in your packets. I'm going to see if I can share my screen and make this work, and we'll run through this PowerPoint.
And hey, Nick, if you're able to zoom in at all on the PowerPoint, that is helpful. Some of the counselors are looking at it on iPads and Surface Pros, so the screen is a little bit smaller than what may be in an actual office.
Got it. I will do my best. The PowerPoint seems to be resisting any attempt I have to zoom in right now. Are folks seeing the title slide now on their screen?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So my firm specializes in public financial analysis. One subset of that is urban renewal financial analysis. And we've been doing this type of work for a little over a decade now, and have, handled nearly, I'd say, 100 projects across the state of Oregon. We were brought in this particular time around because the city of St. Helens adopted an urban renewal plan, I believe it was 2017, and has high hopes for providing significant funding for infrastructure projects and economic development projects in the area. By this point in time, the plan has had a couple of years in which it should have collected tax increment revenues. We were originally projecting that in these first few years, the area would generate close to $500,000 of total TIF revenue. And instead, the area has received something more like $67,000 in revenue, including virtually no money in the past fiscal year. Because of such a dramatic shortfall from the original projections to the actual revenues, the city decided that it would be prudent to have an updated forecast for where the urban renewal area is likely to go from here and what that means for the financial capacity of this urban renewal area. Just as a refresher, I think everyone on this call is well aware of what the boundary is. And I actually believe Jenny informed me that this version of the boundary is slightly out of date. But in case folks want to refer back to the boundary map at any point in tonight's conversation, we do include a slide here as well for any members of the audience who might not be familiar with where this urban renewal area is in the city. The rest of this presentation is overwhelmingly financial. So we're starting off by looking at the historical change in assessed value in the area. So we see in 2017, the urban renewal area was formed and it had a frozen base assessed value of 171 million. The original projections anticipated that there would be about 4.5% growth in that assessed value each year into the future based on new development activity taking place in the area. Over the first few years of the life of the urban renewal area, it experienced slow growth, none of the new construction that we had been hoping for in those early years. And then in 2020, the area took a nosedive in its assessed value, and that was largely due to one particular property, the Armstrong business, that closed down inside of the area and had a very substantial loss of assessed value associated with that property. Because the assessed value of the area fell below the original frozen base value, that is what led to essentially no tax increment revenue in this most recent year. And in any future years, the area has a hole that it needs to dig out of. It has to have growth in assessed value above $171 million before any new tax increment revenue would be generated. This slide is actually this slide has been updated since the version that was in your packet. So when I was preparing today, I realized that what we were showing is the original forecast tax revenue amount for 2020 was actually the cumulative amount of revenue through that point in time. So it was double counting the 2019 numbers. So this just shows, though, again, the stark difference between what was originally projected in these first 2 years of the urban renewal area and what actually came to pass. And again, in the current fiscal year, or I guess now it's last fiscal year ending 2020, there was $148 of tax revenue imposed compared to the nearly 300,000 that was originally estimated. That's the history, the brief history of the area. The next slides that we have here focus on the updated forecasts. This analysis included a range of growth projections, including 3 different scenarios. They vary based on the amount of future development that is expected to occur in the area. In this low growth forecast, we were only including projects that have recently finished construction and have not yet come on the tax roll, or projects that are currently under construction and will be coming on the tax roll soon as well. In our low forecast, this includes nearly $10 million of construction activity that took place in last calendar year and will be coming on this year's tax roll, as well as a little over $25 million of construction activity taking place this current calendar year and will come on the tax rolls soon. Some of the large projects that are included there include Legacy Health Clinic and the St. Helens Place apartments. So we are expecting those values to come on the tax rolls in the near future. When we look at our medium growth scenario, this includes some additional speculative development that has not yet begun construction, but that city staff believes is highly likely to occur in the near future. And in particular, we're talking about phase 1 of the Veneer development. However, that project is anticipated to have a vertical housing tax abatement, which means that 80% of the created assessed value wouldn't be coming on the line immediately. Instead, it would have a 10-year abatement period before it would come on the line. So there is a delay between when that construction would occur and when a lot of those benefits would accrue to the urban renewal area. The high growth scenario includes additional development that is less certain to occur. In particular, here we're looking at phases 2 and 3 of the Veneer development, which would take place in future years. Combined, these could add something close to $100 million of tax or of construction value to the tax rolls. But these are not guaranteed projects. There is uncertainty about the eventual amount and timing of that construction. Note that everything we're showing here on these slides, this is the assumed construction value of the projects, but due to Oregon's property tax system, for every dollar of construction activity, that does not translate to $1 of assessed value. The system requires that the assessor convert it from real market value to assessed value using a changed property ratio. The details get relatively technical, but this next slide converts those construction dollars into the assumed exception value. This is the assessed value that would come on the tax rolls. And so you can see we are still anticipating roughly $5 million of new construction coming on the tax rolls this year, close to 20 million coming on the tax rolls the following year. And then depending on what happens with future construction activity, particularly the veneer development, there could be substantial chunks of additional revenue coming on in the future. Everything so far has been talking about new construction. There is one other sizable source of growth in assessed value in the short term. That is the expiration of existing tax abatements. So it so happens that this area is home to Cascade Tissue, and they have significant amounts of property that received enterprise zone tax abatement benefits. Those benefits are expiring in the next few years. This includes $26 million of assessed value that is scheduled to come back onto the tax roll this year, $7.6 million the following year, and $4.2 million a few years after that. So these yellow bars that you see on the chart show the impact of expiring tax abatements, in addition to the new construction shown in blue. All told, for the next couple of years, we are looking at roughly $25 to $30 million of new assessed value being added to the tax rolls in each of the next 2 years. That's on top of the background growth that we experience in the area from appreciation of the existing property. So with these 2 years, we do anticipate a relatively rapid rebound in terms of assessed value in the area. This chart is showing the orange line, which was the original projected assessed value for the area. The green line, short as it is the actual growth in assessed value in the area. And then blue shows the 3 different forecasts that we came up with. So again, over the next few years, we are anticipating a significant rebound in growth in this area. However, at that point in time, the original forecast does continue to outpace what we have projected going forward. Depending on the level of new construction activity in our high forecast scenario, we do show that the area would roughly catch up to the original projections. However, due to this early year period where it lags behind, in terms of cumulative funding capacity, it would still be trailing the original projections. This slide looks very similar to the last one, but here we're showing tax increment revenue rather than assessed value. Again, the orange line was the original projection, and the blue shaded areas show the updated forecasts, the low, medium, and high. Again, in the high forecast, we do anticipate that the area would be able to come very close to achieving the same growth as the original projections, again, missing out on some of that value in the short term. So those charts are nice, but this table here can provide a little bit more specificity on exactly what we're forecasting. All of the numbers shown here are the amount of financial capacity through fiscal year ending 2043. 2043 is not some magic number. It is not a hard and fast expiration date, but it was the targeted termination date for the plan when it was adopted. So it was estimated that the maximum indebtedness could be fully incurred and paid off by that point in time. That is not a legally binding sunset date. It is purely a target date, and maximum indebtedness really is the limiting factor for urban renewal plans. And it is typical for urban renewal plans to either, if their revenue streams are more robust than originally projected, then they would achieve their maximum indebtedness sooner and close down sooner than the original plan projected. Or if their revenue stream is lower than originally forecast, it can take more time and more years to collect enough TIF revenue to achieve the full amount of maximum indebtedness. But for the sake of having apples to apples comparison in our forecasts, we held that 2043 date as the time frame for our analysis. What we showed is that from now through that 2043 period, the amount of TIF revenue forecast for the area would vary from 47 million to 76 million, depending on the amount of new construction that we see here. That would support a maximum indebtedness, or a total amount of indebtedness incurred, ranging from 38 million in the low scenario up to 60.8 million in the high scenario. The actual approved maximum indebtedness for the area is 62 million. So we can see that in all of the scenarios we are looking at, in the given or targeted time frame of 2043, we do not anticipate that the area will have the financial capacity to achieve that maximum indebtedness. However, in the high scenario, we are forecasting that would get awful close to achieving that originally planned maximum indebtedness. One other number that we show here, and maximum indebtedness for this conversation is really the one we tend to focus on, but that maximum indebtedness is always stated in nominal or year of expenditure dollars. So if you spend, $100 or $10 million on a project 20 years from now, that, because of the power of inflation, is not going to buy you nearly as much as $10 million today. So what we do oftentimes is convert that future indebtedness back into today's dollars. And so this shows you what your real financing capacity is in terms of projects when they're stated in constant 2020 dollars. And so we show that that financial capacity of the area would range from 27.8 million in the low scenario to 43.6 million in the high scenario. And additionally, these subsequent rows in the table show when that capacity would be available over time. One thing to keep in mind is that in all of our forecasts, we do show about $8 million of revenue would be available in terms of borrowing capacity in these first 5 years. After we've completed that initial forecast, and it was apparent that in all of our scenarios, we were looking at lower revenue capacity than we had originally projected in the adopted plan, staff asked us to look at a potential amendment to the plan that could potentially help to increase that financial capacity. So we looked at a 10-acre parcel that's expected to develop as 78 housing units, estimated real market value of $11 million for this construction, which would translate to roughly $7.5 million of new taxable assessed value. And if this amendment were to occur, we anticipate that it would increase the total TIF revenue in this area by roughly 2.8 million between now and 2043. That would be enough in the high scenario for the area to achieve the full authorized maximum indebtedness in the time frame that was originally desired. All right, in terms of the key takeaways from all of this financial analysis, number one, it's very clear that historical growth in the area was below the original projections. This gap is due largely to the closure of the Armstrong World Industries manufacturing facility. Additionally, future growth in assessed value is uncertain and dependent upon future construction activity. So the urban renewal area does have substantial potential for future development, but the exact timing and value of that new construction is uncertain. The outcome of potential major projects like the veneer development will go a long way towards determining the future financial capacity of the URA. Expiring tax exemptions will provide immediate financial capacity. So this is good news for the area that despite the lack of any TIF revenue this most recent year, the expiration of enterprise zone benefits for Cascade Tissue Group should add $38 million of assessed value back onto the tax rolls in the coming years, including $26 million in this current fiscal year when it's released this October. Updated forecasts are still below the original projections. So again, we do have some relatively good news in the forecast for the next couple of years here, but given the rocky start that the urban renewal area got off to, it still does show in all of the projections that we have that the urban renewal area would be unable to achieve the full amount of maximum indebtedness in the originally desired time frame. One option for addressing that would be collecting TIF for a longer period of time to allow the URA to achieve its maximum indebtedness. So I mentioned this earlier, but the urban renewal plan does not have a binding expiration date. Instead, maximum indebtedness is the limiting factor of the plan, and the URA has the ability to collect TIF revenue as long as necessary to achieve the full amount of maximum indebtedness. And the last point on the conclusion slide here is that amending the boundary could increase that financial capacity. So we looked at a specific 10-acre parcel that could generate an additional $2.8 million of TIF revenue. I believe staff have also identified other boundary changes that could further improve the expected financial performance of the URA. So that is the conclusions of our updated financial analysis. I'm free for any questions on the topic now.
I have one question. There is planned to be a build of, I think, 150 units of non-taxable living units because it's a federal property or a federally funded operation. Does that help or hurt, or is it just a wash as far as the overall financial picture?
So when it comes to tax exempt development, it certainly does not help the area. Other than, it could be a catalyst for additional development nearby, but that would not have any direct benefit. I don't know if that property in question is already tax exempt. If it's taxable now and then will convert to tax exempt when this development occurs, then that would have a negative impact on the urban renewal area, as you'd take existing value that's taxable and subtract that down to zero when the construction occurs and it becomes tax exempt.
Okay. Do I hear any more questions?
Can I see the map again?
Yeah, let me share my screen one more time and we'll get back to that slide.
I'm just thinking if we're going to make an adjustment, I wanted to look at the slide.
All right, can folks see the map now?
Yeah.
Nope.
Here, Nick, I'm gonna share my screen. It's a little bit of a better map, I think.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Oh, never mind.
Is that the correct?
Oh,
Oh,
Jenny, if you want to share yours, if you have a better map, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's the up-to-date one, and I think it's just a little bit more detailed. Can you guys see it?
yeah, but yours are not color coded, so it's hard.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to look in a specific area?
Can I'll just ask you the questions because
Okay.
you will know my point of reference.
Yeah.
Nick will not know my point of reference.
Yes.
If we're going to make an adjustment to include the 10 acres out by the commons area,
Yes.
does the area already include the Highway 30 corridor? So developments adjacent to Legacy would be encompassed by it already?
So I'm going to show you, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more into that area.
Because I'm wondering because there's, still construction happening on Highway 30 near Legacy.
Yeah. So can you guys see my cursor?
Wiggle it.
Yes,
Yes,
can.
I can.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
So
I
this
see it now.
This is the St. Helens Place Apartments and Legacy.
Okay.
And then if you take the highway up, this is one of the parcels. This would be Greystone that we're considering
Right.
adding.
So the area for Legacy is already in it.
Correct. Yeah. And that's why we've included that in our updated revenue projections, because we know that's coming online and will help our agency see some of that money.
So when we capture out there, is it Greystone Estates? When we capture out there, will we take something else off or are we just growing the area?
Yeah, these are great questions. So we actually have on the agenda tonight a contract with Elaine Howard, who's also here and can answer questions about the amendment process. But we'll go in more detail about what properties we should add and what properties we should subtract. As Nick noted, financially, there's not a huge impact on whether or not we leave properties like the Gable Road apartments that we know are owned by NOAA now. But in terms of amendments and future amendments, it does help us to take square footage out of the area.
Any development could cause adjacent development. So if there's vacant property next to something that could be catalyzed, even though Greystone Estates, there's still commercial property there that doesn't have plans for it yet that could still happen. And it's like where the St. Helens, the new apartments there off of Matson Street, there's commercial property in front of that is yet to be developed. So, as long as we're going to scoop up potential development and let other things that are less likely to develop kind of sit on the back burner.
Right. Yeah. And initially, when we talked about this, those commercial properties that are next to Greystone, we're talking about adding those because they're already adjacent to the boundary, and it's pretty simple to just pull those ones in at the same time.
Okay, that answers my question. I just wanted to, as long as we had a map here, I wanted to look at it.
Sounds like we'll get a lot more questions answered here soon, Jenny.
Okay,
As we go through the amendment process, yeah, it's not our goal tonight to figure out all of the amendments and the land area that we want to subtract and add. We just are approving the consulting, contract to start the process for that. Are there other questions for Nick while we have him?
Well, my only question would be, so I seen that we could actually borrow leverage 10 million in the first 5
That's
years
what I took away too.
with the projections, yes, which is
Yeah.
good. But if Greystone were to be adopted and say they started building there next year or maybe this fall, I don't know, probably not this fall, next year, that projection of that first 5 change, Nick?
Yeah, it would. And also the financing assumptions that we included here were fairly vanilla. We were looking 30 years out in time and using broad assumptions of interest rates and the timing of loans and debt service coverage ratios. If the boundary is amended and we have new property that's added and we're looking at a specific set of projects with a specific date that you'd like to pull the trigger and do the borrowing, then you could come up with far more detailed financing assumptions. And in the short term, interest rates are at historic lows. We were conservative in our assumptions and had higher interest rate. So with lower interest rates today, you could borrow more than we've shown here. And depending on what lender you're able to use, the amortization period, whether this is going to be a 10-year borrowing, 20-year borrowing, or more, also will affect how much you can borrow. And I don't know the specifics, but I do know that the state of Oregon is one option for loans right now for these types of infrastructure and economic development projects. And they offer really great terms in terms of long-term amortization periods and low interest rates. So
we're talking about Business Oregon, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Business Oregon is also great because unlike working with a traditional lender like a bank that would not particularly be interested in your or my spreadsheets showing future forecasts of growth in tax revenue. They want to see your actual bank statement and how much money you collected last year. But the Business Oregon and the state of Oregon, they're able to be a little bit more thoughtful about these projections. They know how Oregon property tax system works. They know the delay between when someone puts a shovel in the ground and when the money actually is received. They understand that, and so they are more willing to loan based on these projects that are coming down the pike.
Okay, great.
A question on the Armstrong property. We have a facility. Now, the company did not go out of business. It changed its business plan. How does that affect the taxes?
So the real impact on taxes when it comes to these industrial properties usually relates to the value of machinery and equipment on site. So, the physical building that happens to be located there probably didn't change a whole lot from, one business model to another. That physical building and the piece of land would retain a similar value from year to year. But the machinery and equipment has its own assessed value. And when those pieces of machinery are turned off and shipped out to a different area, then that value disappears overnight. And so if there's a change in business model and if there are big machines or pieces of equipment that are no longer needed, that's where we see the impacts on assessed value.
Okay, you say not needed or removed. Is there a difference?
No, it's removed. Anything that stays on site will continue to have value, though when it comes to these types of machines, they tend to depreciate relatively rapidly. And so if a company leaves the machines on site but are no longer using them and not investing in new equipment over time, then we would also see a more gradual decrease in value on that property.
Okay, so it's more what's in the buildings than the buildings or the area. Okay.
Yeah, when it comes to industrial property, that's typically the case.
It's not a based on how much product goes through that.
Correct. Yeah. So from the assessor's perspective, they are really looking at the value of the land and improvements itself, and not the value of the business that's operating on that site.
Okay, so we could have a company that uses 3 paper folders and turns out 10 times as much money, but we're only able to tax on a couple of the jinky paper folders.
Exactly.
Okay. Are there any other comments on this presentation?
Yeah, I would just say that, this is John here. The Armstrong hit us very hard, obviously, clearly in the financial perspective, and also on the utility side. Armstrong was a $700,000 a year revenue to the city's utility system. So when they left, the rest of the community had to absorb that. But and the tax consequences that we're seeing here are pretty clear. The one positive things is, rather than mothball and leave it in place, is that they are actively marketing the site. So it could be worse, as I guess my message here is that they've been courting development that's actively being industrially marketed. We get occasionally inquiries in different types of new possibilities that could happen on that site. So they've cleaned up all of the environmental issues as far as settling with the state and made it more suitable to other potential owners as well. It's not all bad.
Somebody comes in with expensive equipment.
So that comes in with a, yes. The cure to COVID, how about that? So.
Okay, we now have a approval for signature for personal service agreement. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think it would be great if Elaine could walk us through at least the public engagement side, since Councilor Carlson asked about transparency earlier. I think it's good to know what this amendment will require as far as public involvement.
Hi, I'm Elaine Howard. I helped with your original plan in kind of more of a support role, but I am the firm that does amendments in Oregon on urban renewal plans and can help you do this if you decide to proceed. So the statute, ORS 457, requires public involvement in a substantial amendment. The process for a substantial amendment has specific meetings where you can accomplish public involvement, or you can decide to add to that. So the specific meetings that are required are a meeting first by the Urban Renewal Agency to review the draft amendment. So once it's all put together, and then to make a decision whether to send it out for taxing jurisdiction review. If they do that, then you do send it out to all of the different taxing districts, and then you also then take it to your planning commission in an open public meeting for review of conformance to your comprehensive plan. So citizens would have an opportunity to come to that meeting. Although it doesn't have to be a public hearing, we always advise the planning commission to take testimony on this because it is part of the public process. And then there is a required city council hearing where you notice all citizens of the city, either through utility bills, voter records, or addresses, postal patrons for a city council hearing. If we're still under COVID hearing, it would still be a virtual hearing, but you need to set up accommodation. So if people want to join the hearing and ask questions, they're able to do that. And then it's a non-emergency ordinance that has to go through whatever your non-emergency ordinance procedure is, and is effective 30 days after it's adopted. So there are those, and then there's a county briefing. So there are 4 meetings that are open public meetings where this would be reviewed. If you decide you want more public involvement than that, then you could certainly add that. But those 4 meetings are required and are a part of the amendment.
Thank you, Elaine.
How much time does this boilerplate take that's basically set in state law?
Jenny and I have put together a very aggressive schedule, which basically has us getting this completed by December. That would be the most aggressive schedule. That would be getting everything together very quickly, making the decisions about what you're putting in and if you're taking out, and putting all the documents together and having that back to your agency for your September 2nd meeting. So that's a very quick turnaround. I think we can do that. Jenny is very good about getting us information that we need, as long as we know what parcels you're going to add. Nick has the bulk of his financial work done. We have to take that and put that into the amendment, but that's about as quick as it can be done.
Yeah.
On the other side, how long could it stretch for the couple? This state seems to have little speed bumps anytime you turn around. What would be a realistic number of the way things are going with this
I
pandemic?
think this is realistic unless it's a non-emergency ordinance. All non-emergency ordinances, if a petition is signed by a specified number of people in your community and they want to put it to a vote, that is what would lengthen this time frame. So if that would happen, then the amendment would go to a vote instead of being approved by City Council.
Yeah. And the next step would be to have another agency meeting in about a month to look at the map of proposed additions and subtractions to the agency.
Is that recommended?
Actually, Jenny, we have on our schedule that all documents are done by that next meeting. So if indeed we aren't deciding for sure on parcels until the next meeting, then that would put us backwards a month.
Okay.
So if there can be an interim check back with folks, and if that's not possible, then everything moves back a month.
Got it.
We need, what, a couple days notice for our meeting, so. Question for you, Elaine, is that us amending our urban renewal, we can adopt up to 2% right now. Now, through the amendment process and us like shifting properties, obviously, in the future, are we still allowed to amend up to 2%? I think it was 2%. Does that sound right?
No, it's
Is it?
there are two levels. 1% you can do just as a minor amendment, and that's easy, and that's done by resolution of your agency.
Okay.
You have up to 20%. So it's at 2 with, you probably remember the 2, but it's actually 20%. You can add 20% to your original urban renewal area, and that's all. You don't ever get to add any more.
Sure, and they have to abut each other, is that correct?
Pardon me?
They have to abut, the urban renewal has to stay a whole?
Yeah, it has to be contiguous. You can do that through a cherry stem on right-of-way, so you don't have to take all parcels in between. You can go through right-of-way and pick up a parcel that is an outlier, but you do have to use a right-of-way to get to that parcel.
Okay.
Is this kind of a land gerrymander technology?
You could call it that. Let me verify 2 other things on acreages, because there are things that are confused. Once you've amended over 1% at any point, any other addition is always a substantial amendment. So it's this big process. So you get to do up to 1% only once, and anything over that becomes a substantial amendment. And then the other thing is, if you take acreage out, it's not fungible. So if you take it out, that doesn't give you more capacity on that 20%. That 20% is a hard and fast against your original acreage, whether or not you have deleted. However, it does give you capacity in the future if you ever decide to do another urban renewal area, in terms of looking at your amount of acreage as a percentage of your total city. So that would be a reason to take out that nonprofit property. Would be if it's not going to do anything good for you in the area, you may not want it in the area and use up acreage.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So it sounds like we have to have a meeting here fairly soon to adopt those areas.
It's good to hear about all the little kinks and jinks that we have to make sure we go through to do this. It seems like a whole lot of boilerplate that we're nailed to.
It is.
Well, the whole purpose is to make sure that it's done honestly, and the urban renewal is set up to where you have to stay focused on those projects that are identified in that urban renewal. Because when these first started, there was a lot of willy-nilly dollars going out that weren't making sense. So the legislator amended the rules on urban renewals and strengthened it up, so to speak.
Right. And that's why we need Elaine's help to negotiate all of this through the amendment process, because it's a lot to negotiate.
Yeah.
A quick question, can the state rules change on this, or are we fixed into this urban renewal plan?
State rules always can change. In 2019, there were amendments to urban renewal that made some changes, just as we were kind of finishing up your plan. There's always potential for urban renewal to change because it's a statutory authority. Once you have an urban renewal area, let's say the legislature decided to get rid of urban renewal, it couldn't get rid of your existing area. You know, it might have stipulations for how it would have to be phased out, but it couldn't all of a sudden say, well, you can't do it anymore, because urban renewal areas a lot of times have incurred debt and you've got to be able to pay off that debt. But urban renewal is a statutory authority, and the legislature has the ability to change that statute at any time.
But there's a certain amount of uncertainty in 20, 30 years out.
In Oregon, thankfully, we've had some changes due to property tax limitations. So measures 5, 47, and 50 made some changes just to how you calculate urban renewal, how you get it, but it didn't take away authority for urban renewal. So we've had urban renewal in Oregon since 1957, and we've had it consistently, and hopefully we'll have it consistently, for the length of this plan also.
So we were a big mill town with 5 mills in our area. So if you can help us in a way of amending measure 5 and 50, that would be great.
I know.
You add that to your contract real quickly.
Yeah, really. I wish I had that kind of power.
It'd be a never-ending contract.
Yeah.
Now we've had the discussion, do we have to have a vote to see if we're going to continue this with this particular contractor? That's up to you, Jenny.
Yeah, we need a motion for approval and authorized for signature Elaine's contract.
Do I hear a motion for signature?
Do we also need to do Tiberius Solutions as well? No?
Elaine is subbing for the financial production. It's all one contract.
Okay, I make a motion that we hire Elaine Howard Consulting for our urban renewal amendment.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? Motion carried. Doug Morton's here, so take it to his bed and make him sign it before he wakes up.
I noticed that as well.
Okay, now it's administrative report time. John?
Okay, for the past several years, I've been talking a lot about Armstrong. They're leaving, what it's meant to the city, and this kind of really puts a real razor's edge on all the issues in a fair amount of detail, and hopefully that's satisfactory because it helped me understand the issues as well. But the next timeline where renewal is really about getting the projects going sooner than later, and this amendment process. So we had those setbacks on the early end of this the plan here with the finance, so we haven't been able to advance as quickly as we'd like. So this amendment process is an opportunity to accelerate that, and that's exciting. We've had a fairly realistic but aggressive schedule to try to get that completed before some of these properties come on the tax roll. So we capture that increment and are able to, build all the projects in our plan, which were pretty, that body of the planning work going into the urban renewal plan is a lot more sophisticated than most urban renewal plans you'll take a look at. And a lot of times they're very aspirational, not well defined. Our plan has a lot of specificity about it, and has projects that are intended to create more tax base and not just publicly funded projects or things of that nature. So it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to your support, and we're going to keep on going. So.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it was so specific that we had not an issue. Everybody wanted we went in 3 increments for that urban renewal. I just want to, if anybody's listening that's not familiar, that all the taxing agencies said, this is so great, we want you to go for the largest amount and get this going. St. Helens deserves it. So, yep.
Now, John, we have a tugboat company coming up and having a dock. How much of that can be added to the tax rolls? Their heavy equipment floats.
That is I don't know that we've answered that question. I know that they're going to make some improvements to the docks, or if the docks are even assessed at all. The lease from Wilsonville Concrete Products is initially is for the water in front of the docks, anchorages. So I would have to have a conversation with the assessor to understand how they would look at that.
Do we go into the water? Does this urban renewal area stop at water's edge?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen again.
Yep.
So we actually had a long conversation about how much of the water of the river to include. And originally we included, I think it was over 100 feet, 150 feet. And we realized it was counting against us in the square footage that we're allowed. And so we dialed that back significantly to what it is now. And I think it's 50 feet of the water.
We do have water in this urban renewal.
We have
Yeah.
50 foot.
Yeah,
Okay, that's
beyond
correct.
the
And the dock
access.
is not that wide. Okay.
Right. So I guess my point is in-water facilities would be captured if they're within 50 feet of the shore.
Okay. I was worried that it was from the high water back.
Yeah, we thought about that when we first drafted.
What if just the face of the building was within that 50 feet? Does it count?
Just the face of the
And like say the first 10 feet was in that 50 feet and the rest of it was out another 35 beyond that line.
in the water.
Yeah.
I think so in that case, the assessor would create 2 separate tax bills.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, because that was the issue when we amended
We might want to look at adopting maybe 10 more feet.
That is a possibility.
It's seriously something that I wish you guys would look at.
And can we, looking at the map here from the big map that you have, it's like how many acres down there are park space that is never going to have taxes on it?
Yeah, so we kind of touched on having a next meeting to talk about what staff's recommendation for additions and removals are, and then take input if there are any other properties that should be added or subtracted. But one of the ones we're looking at is this majority wetland parcel here as a removal. And so we were thinking along those same lines.
Some edits.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sounds good.
John, do you have any more comments?
That concludes my comments, unless you have questions.
I think you've been given the questions.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions? The chairman hearing none, adjourns the meeting.